Asta vs. Yuno is by far the most often discussed versus battle in the Black Clover fandom, and it's not hard at all to see why. They stand as adoptive brothers who have grown to become rivals, and both possess some of the greatest power levels in the series. And right now, this isn't like Goku versus Vegeta or Naruto versus Sasuke. Asta and Yuno have yet to actually have a fight against each other. The closest they got was Yuno sending an attack at Asta, knowing that he would counter it, as he wanted everyone to see how amazing Asta's power was. But because Asta and Yuno have yet to fight, it leads to very long versus battle debates on many different platforms. I did an Asta vs. Yuno video years ago at the end of the Elf Saga, and now that the Spade Saga is over, it's time for a rematch to compare Asta vs. Yuno in the Spade Saga, which consists of two arcs: the Heart Kingdom Joint Struggle arc, which is chapters 229 to 260, and the Spade Kingdom Raid arc, which takes place between chapters 261 and 331. Just to let you know, this will contain manga spoilers, and all the information used in the video is from the currently released 331 chapters of the Black Clover manga, so do consider any missed out evidence coming from post chapter 331. They were not available to me at the time, and plus this is just scaling them in this saga, so anything after the saga really doesn't hold weight in this, unless if it's flashbacks to the saga. Now, I'm actually going to be doing this video quite different from my regular power scaling videos, as I'll go over the different versions of Asta and Yuno from these two arcs within the Black Clover second saga, starting with their base forms from the beginning of the post time skip and going up to their final forms. So if we compare their base forms, it really honestly is not very fair for Yuno, as he doesn't really get any base feats in the first arc of this saga, which is why I would say that base Asta and the post time skip would likely defeat base Yuno. Asta's gotten a lot better at using his anti-magic power. He can use Black Slash to create ranged anti-magic slashes. He can use his Demon Destroyer pretty easily now. He can fly on the Demon Slayer, giving him a lot more increased mobility in battle, and also can now use his Black Divider in base form, which, if you don't know, Black Divider is a 4x multiplier, because we can compare Asta's power with Lumiere and Zagred in the Elf art to get a multiplier for it. Asta in his Black form too was essentially nothing to Zagred, even with Yuno's help. And that was a Zagred who had yet to wield his Grimoire. Then when Zagred pulled out his Grimoire, increasing his power and summoning a spell, and getting much stronger. And yes, this spell, this large mass that absorbs life and magic, is actually a spell of Zagred. So that means it is tied and draws from his power. Even when Zagred first activates it, he is stated to be drastically holding it back, as he says he's only opening the lid. Now we know that those who are arcane have magic that is resistant to the spell, but even then, these characters must actually be strong enough to still destroy it. Like Yami's Black Slashes don't actually do much to that miasma of a spell. Lumiere is able to essentially passively destroy the life-stealing spell with just his sheer aura of magical power flying through it. But when Zagred sees the seriousness of the situation, as both the Wizard King and the Elven Chieftain have returned to stop him, Zagred raises his power and sends the life-stealing spell after them. Lumiere then is forced to activate Mana Zone to actually counter the life-stealing spell. As I've mentioned numerous times across my videos, the Black Clover guidebook states that Mana Zone increases the magical power of the wielder many times, which definitionally would mean at least 4, as the definition of several is more than 2, but less than many, which means that several is at least 3, and if many is more than several, then many means at least 4 according to the dictionary. Remember, Asta was far weaker than a Grimoire-less Zagred in his Black form too, but with Black Divider is essentially relative to a serious Zagred with his Grimoire, so that means that Black Divider made him over 4 times stronger, as he can take many attacks from Zagred, including Zagred summoning numerous spells, even death and torture spells on him that do absolutely nothing to him, which means that Asta would have to have gotten many times stronger thanks to Black Divider. So like I said, at least 4 times. And unlike I said, Yuno does not have very much really any base form feats, but we get some decent base Asta feats. With his Demon Destroyer, he can neg stage 0 spells, as he negged the effect of the Spade Captain, his Basilisk Breath, who said his spell was the top of the stage system, which makes it a stage 0 spell. Asta even withstood the direct pressure of Dante's gravity and was thrust into the ground. Asta in his base form could fly at a relative speed to Rill, who was using True Magic, a captain in the post-time skip. Yuno himself, he would have Mana Zone, he would be a lot stronger from the pre-time skip, and Mana Zone would also, of course, increase his power by 4, but we don't really have a grounds to measure his base power in this arc, as he pretty much only uses his augmented power through forms or techniques. If I were to compare base Asta in the first arc of the saga versus base Yuno, Yuno using Mana's Own and Asta using Black Divider, I'd have to argue that it's very likely that Asta would win. There's even an argument that base Asta right now is even stronger than his Black Form 2 Black Divider when he fought Zagred, as when he was in his Black Form 2 in that arc, he needed both hands to wield the Black Divider, and now he can wield Black Divider with a single arm casually. But that is just a piece of evidence. I wouldn't say that necessarily means he is above his base form, but it definitely adds more credence to that Asta would defeat Yuno in a base-to-base battle. Now, Yuno, of course, has Spirit Dive, which is also stated to be a many times increase in power, and I believe that he would actually defeat base Asta, as this would grant him a huge power boost. He can use attacks like Spirit Storm. He's very mobile. He can use Spirit's Mana Hush Dance, and if they are comparable at all in their base, then I would have to say that he would probably defeat Asta, but there's a lot more to back that up, as it's even likely that Spirit Dive 1 Yuno could actually defeat Black Form 1 Asta, even Black Form 1 Black Divider Asta. As if you look at it, when Asta fought the Spade Captain, he needed to transform into his Black Form and use a large Black Divider to defeat him and his Basilisk. Whereas Yuno in his Spirit Dive could fight a 40% Dark Disciple, who should easily be several times stronger than the Spade Captain, at least probably 8 times. So not only do I think that Spirit Dive 1 Mana Zone Yuno is above base Asta, but also above Black Form 1 Black Divider Asta as well. Now with the return of Black Form 2 Black Divider Asta, he would likely defeat Spirit Dive 1 Mana Zone Yuno. But then this is where we get the comparison of Black Form 2 Black Divider Asta versus Spirit Dive 2 Zephyr Yuno, as Yuno would unlock his Zephyr and would reveal that he has his Spirit Dive that he could use back when he had his Elven Mana. And remember, these are the 2 versions of the characters we left off of in my last versus battle between the 2, when it was the Elf Saga versions of them. Well, these of course are stronger, but which of these versions of these characters would win in a battle after the time skip? Well, Asta really doesn't have much feats in this form. All we do is we see Asta getting toyed around with a base Dante, and required Goshu's help to create a dozen clones of himself to push Dante to 50% devil power, whereas Yuno in Spirit Dive 2 defeated a full power 40% Dark Disciple, which still has never proved to be that great of a feat looking back on it, as there are 50% Dark Disciples and they are even weaker than the base Dark Triad, so it's actually really hard to compare these versions of Yuno and Asta. We do see Yuno actually be fast enough to parry strikes from Xenon and strong enough to destroy his bones, and this is a Xenon that is using some percentage of his devil power, as his cloak is supposed to be white fur, but in this it has black fur, which shows he's using devil power. Even when Xenon uses a higher level of devil power so that Yuno wasn't actually chopping through the bones, Yuno was still damaging it. The bones were just regenerating faster than he could cut. Well, this would be kind of inconsistent. Base Vonica could one-shot a 50% Dark Disciple without even using a spell. And Xenon even said that 50% Dark Disciples are stronger than 40% Dark Disciples, and it was stated the Dark Triad they were as strong as each other. So it is possible, if not even probable, that Xenon was actually suppressing his power against Yuno, like how Dante was against Asta, which is further supported that Yuno was weaker as stated by Foil, because he was tired from his battle with God Roy. So it really is up to your interpretation. If Xenon was holding back, then these 2 characters are likely pretty equal, though if you scale up from the feats, then Yuno is likely a bit stronger than Asta. So like I said, if you consider Yuno cutting Xenon's bones a legitimate feat and that was an actual Xenon who was using relative portions of his power, then he would scale way above Black Form 2 Black Divider Asta. But if you take the highballed version of Yuno I just discussed, he still does not compare to Berserk Asta, otherwise dubbed as Black Form 3, as Berserk Asta was able to actually react, parry, and destroy many spells from a 60% Dante, while Yuno got utterly destroyed by a 55% Xenon. Keep in mind that, like I said, it's very likely that both the Triad were holding back here against the protagonists, but Asta would be considered more impressive as he went against a higher percentage of Dante, though Asta would still ascend higher from here, attaining his Devil Arm via a Devil Bargains ritual. This acts as him gaining the true anti-magic power directly instead of getting it dribbled through the swords onto him. Essentially what this means is that he can use less volume of anti-magic and still be considered far stronger, as Black Form 2 Devil Arm Asta did far better against an 80% Dante than Berserk Asta, which puts Asta at clearly the most powerful of the 2 in this Heart Kingdom joint struggle arc, as Yuno got utterly destroyed by 55% Xenon, whereas Asta actually defeated an 80% Dante. So it's very clear that Asta scales way above Yuno in this arc. But what about the next arc? It's the Spade Kingdom Radar. Well, before we get into that, I want to talk about something that's very important to me, and that is my webtoons coming out called 9 Fates. I've been working on it with Arthur DeBurr. This is our webtoon. He's doing the art. I'm writing the story, doing the comic scripts, and we're excited to announce that you can go read the chapters now. There's 2 chapters out, and we are announcing a Patreon. So if you go read the chapters for free and you really like the story, you can help support it so that chapters are released more frequently, the chapters are higher quality, and there are some really good rewards there. So I'll have a link in the description where you can go check out the Patreon and see the different tiers. So if you really want to help support me in this channel and help support Arthur DeBurr and creating our vision of our own webtoon, please go support the 9 Fates Patreon. And go read the chapters for free on webtoons. Anyways, let's start with Yuno and see how long it took for him to surpass Devil Arm Asta. In this brief 3-day time skip, both Yuno and his wind spirit Belle would work hard to overcome their failures. Belle would lay low and just build up on harnessing her power and charging it up, storing that charged mana over the several days. Yuno would also train with the rogue Longris, as he would need to practice against spatial magic to get ready for Zenon's absolute space. When Yuno and Belle finally begin their vaunted rematch against Zenon, they can join their power and go into a higher level of spirit dive and revealed a new spirit weapon called Boreas. Now this form is often called Boreas Yuno, which isn't entirely accurate, but it is still used for simplicity, because if you just say Boreas Yuno, most people will know which version of Yuno you are talking about. Anyone will essentially understand it. In actuality, this should be called Spirit Dive 3 Yuno, or a full Spirit Dive, though we don't actually know if it is truly his full Spirit Dive. Boreas Yuno would easily body an 80% Zenon, just utterly defeating him and on the verge of killing him. Now there was some confusion here for a while, as in the digital release it was written as 70% for Zenon's power. This was fixed though, as in the physical volumes for both Japanese and English now show that this was Zenon's 80% devil power, and it was nothing to Boreas Yuno. That makes more sense because it was stated early on by the Dark Disciple that Zenon could use 80% devil power. This squarely puts Boreas Yuno above Devil Arm Asta, as though Asta did defeat an 80% Dante, he did need Yami's help and it was a struggle, whereas Boreas Yuno defeated 80% Zenon with relative ease, essentially no to low diffing him. So Boreas Yuno would defeat Devil Arm Asta from the pre-time skip. Remember, it was stated by Nixk that the Dark Triad were equals to each other. This was prior to his knowledge of Dante getting stronger from Morris's amp, so that would mean that an 80% Zenon, which should be essentially equal to 80% Dante. So that would put, like I said, Boreas Yuno clearly above Devil Arm Asta. Now, it's important to of course not forget about Asta, as he would be doing his own preparation for vengeance against the darkness that took hold of the Spade Kingdom. Asta trained with the Black Bull's vice captain Noctfaust, a devil user himself, and trained in the Dark Garden in a devil binding ritual. He defeated Libe, his own devil, and Base with only one arm and Yami's katana. And with this, he was able to become closer to Liba and grant him the possibility of Devil Union. Though they still would have to train further, and they would face off against Nockt and his own Devil Union. They wouldn't be able to defeat Nockt, but they could give him some troubles while in Black Form 2 with the Demon Slasher Katana, as they could sense him despite his pack, and were fast enough to hit and damage him with an anti-magic slash. But once Nockt activated Mana Zone, it was utterly over for them, as they would need to get a partial Devil Union to defeat that version of Nockt. Now Nockt and his regular Devil Union actually scales to an amped 80% Dante as the two fought each other. Nockt could block attacks from him, as well as land a punch on him and damaged him. We don't know how much stronger Dante got though from the Morris sorcery science, but it was likely a lot. But because Nockt was still toying with Asta, it's very likely that Boreas Yuno would still defeat this version of Asta, the post-devil friending ritual Asta in his Black Form 2 with the Devil Arm. And then of course comes Devil Union. Devil Union is essentially the fusion of Asta and Liba, and it gives them an exponential boost and power. He's able to easily kill an ancient demon, and shortly after would face off against the twin devils of Lilith and Nama. These devils were incredibly powerful. Even whilst holding their powers back, they were considered to be in a completely different level than an amped 80% Dante. They would then go on to toy with Nockt, and even defeat him in his Double Union. Asta would fight them in a 2-on-1 battle and easily defeat them, killing Nama and forcing Lilith to consume him, and this is where we get Fusion Lilith, who got an exponential boost from consuming Nama, as Nockt said their power was more than just 1+1, meaning Lilith got over 2 times stronger from this fusion. Now Asta was still clearly superior to Fusion Lilith, as he redirected her strongest spell, could damage her, and noted that she was so inferior to Asta, she decided she needed to run away so that his time limit would run out. Now, people use the fact that Asta needed Nox's last-second help to catch Lilith and Nama as a way to downplay Asta and say he is slow, but this really isn't the case, as Lilith had a massive head start when she started to run away, and when we next see Asta, he's actually within the same range of distance, meaning he's at worst a tiny bit slower. Could also just be the same speed, or even a bit faster. It's really not a huge speed difference. She had a head start, and also Asta, when he started fighting, he was not at his full time limit. So, like I said here, if you compare the panels, after a bit of time of chasing each other, they are essentially the same distance away from each other, which would mean they have the same speed. If not, Asta actually looks a little bit closer, which means he'd be still a little bit faster. So if we look at that, how does Devil Union Asta scale to Boreas Yuno? Well, while Yuno could easily defeat an 80% Zenon, he could not defeat 100% Zenon, as he was actually defeated. He was fast enough and strong enough to parry an attack from 100% Zenon, but it did damage him, and he was ultimately inferior to him. He needed long rest to stave him off so that he could save up enough magic power for Eurus, in which it did surpass Zenon in speed and power, as he couldn't dodge it and it blew a hole right in his body. But if Boreas Yuno actually struggled against a 100% Zenon, that spells a problem for Yuno in a battle against Devil Union Asta. It was stated that the 100% Dark Triad are both at and near the same level of a Supreme Devil, which means that they are actually a bit weaker than Lilith or Nama individually. Yet Asta could fight both Lilith and Nama pretty easily at the same time, and of course fought a fusion of them which was more than twice as strong, which means that Devil Union Asta actually clears Boreas Yuno. As we know, this still is not the power gap for either of these studs in this arc. In a coincidental turn of events, Yuno was knocked through a wall by Zenon and lands in the Grimoire Tower and finally attains his Grimoire. See, his wind power and his wind Grimoire were never actually his, as those were originally meant for the elven soul inside of Yuno, the son of Licht and Tetia. No, Yuno's innate magical power is actually star magic, and his new level of power is bonkers. He creates stars that produces rays of light. These rays of light move faster than Devil Zenon's reaction speed, and are able to blow holes through him. See, we should probably talk about Devil Zenon. 100% Zenon, he was about to die, so he sacrificed his soul to Beelzebub so that he could get a devil heart, essentially turning him into a devil, making him drastically stronger. This would mean he's clearly at or above Supreme Devil level, making him at least equal to, if not likely stronger than, Lilith or Nama. This is crazy if you think about it, as base Yuno, after getting star magic, could blitz Devil Zenon and blow holes in him, meaning he's strong enough to damage him. Which means that Yuno went from needing to store up 3 minutes of power for Eurus to defeat 100% Zenon, to casually blitzing and being stronger than Devil Zenon in his base form. Now what this means is that Yuno's new base actually surpasses his old Spirit Dive 3 form, and that Yuno is Supreme Devil class in base form. It is arguable that Yuno is in his new base would actually be quite comparable to the original Devil Union Asta. Now this is where I'm going to actually state a point that will be considered quite controversial, and that is that, like Yuno just did, that Asta surpassed his old transformation in his new base form, which means that what I'm saying is that Asta and his current base is above his original Devil Union power. So what I'll say right now is that Star Magic base Yuno would defeat the Devil Union Asta that fought Lilith and Nama. As you may not have realized it, Asta is Supreme Devil level in his base form. Asta, for one, while flying on the Demon Slayer sword, was able to move faster than the explosion of Devil Lilipechka's exploding life. Devil Lilipechka is a pretty downplayed character in this verse. People think she's not very strong because she isn't an attack mage and she lost the water spirit. These points are not very sound though, as Lilipechka gains her attacks because she is under the control of Vanaka's curses, and it is directly stated that despite losing the water spirit, the cursed Lolo is stronger than she ever was, so strong in fact that her spell was able to break a combo spell from Briar Queen Charlotte and Rill. Charlotte and Rill were fast enough to dodge many spam spells from 100% Vanaka, survive multiple attacks as proven by their wounds. Charlotte could even parry some of Vanaka's spells, which would mean that Charlotte and Rill, while weaker than 100% Vanaka, still have relative stats to her. And since Cursed Lolo could destroy her combo spell, that would make her relative to a Supreme Devil as well. Now Megicula would then turn Cursed Lolo into a full-on Devil, making her far stronger and giving her Devil Water magic. On top of that, Exploding Life would make her power even greater, as when this happened with the Dark Disciples, their magical power swelled to an even greater height than they ever were before. Now when Asta rushes towards her, we can see the explosion is already going off, as light is expanding through the water and is making the water boil. Yet Asta moves faster than the explosion, takes no damage at all while flying through it, and negates it with the Demon Destroyer Sword. Now remember that the powers of the Demon Destroyer Sword correlate to the power of Asta, the stronger the spell, the more anti-magic he has to use with it for it to work. This is proven when Asta has to use a lot of anti-magic in the Destroyer Sword to revert Pottery's Dark Elf form, or when he needed to alterate the physical design of the sword so that it could work better against Lilith and Nama. Now you could say that, oh, well the Exploding Life didn't technically explode yet. It was still strong enough to destroy of Devil Lilipechka's Devil Water magic. It was boiling it, and yet Asta was within that power that was boiling Devil Water magic from Devil Lilo, who was above a Supreme Devil, and Asta was in his base with no damage against it, and then negged it easily, and of course, like I said, he outsped it. Now, I know that a lot of people are probably going to try and downplay this feat, and downplay Lilipechka as a whole, but let's not forget that Megicula said this was going to kill everybody in the area, and that would include 100% Zenon at the very least, and all the other people combined. As I said before, the 100% Dark Triad are essentially so close to the levels of Lilith and Nama, as 2 of these statements are provided by Nixk, and if this was going to kill at least 100% Zenon and all these other people, that would mean that this explosion is at least at the level of Lilith or Nama, a supreme level devil explosion, let alone if this actually meant a suppressed Devil Zenon and everybody else as well. Even more evidence that Asta's supreme devil level and base form is that he withstood Lucifero's gravity. Asta didn't grovel when he was pushed down, which means his lifting strength is pretty high, and that his durability and base is incredible, as his body would need to be durable enough to withstand the force of standing up against the gravity. I'll talk more about Asta's insane base power in my Devil Union scaling video, but basically what this puts it as that both Star Magic base Yuno and Devil Orm base Asta at this point in the series are supreme devil level. People will say that it makes no sense for Asta to get this strong, but like the feats really do support it. The feats are literally there. It also wouldn't be that out of the question. He has a 5th leaf Clover Grimoire, which means he still has a 4 leaf, which progresses his power faster. We also know that Liba resonates with other devils, so if he's around this many devils, including Lucifero, it could make his power stronger, because just like with Zagred, it made him way stronger. Also, if Yuno could do it, then Asta can do it as well. They're rivals. It's like a pendulum. Yuno gets stronger, then Asta gets stronger. Asta gets stronger, then Yuno gets stronger. But even then, if you don't like all the narrative lore that supports it, the feats are still there. But if anything, if the two were to fight, I would give base Yuno an edge in this battle, as he has base feats against Lucifero as well, as his stars could create barriers that negate Lucifero's gravity altogether. That is also Yuno not at his full power, as he wasn't strong enough to reach his full Saint power in the fight against Lucifero. As you can see when he used his full Saint power against Devil Zenon, his Zephyr was bigger, but against Lucifero, it looked way lesser. So I'd have to give the base form edge to Yuno if the two fought. But this is where the debate gets the more interesting, is that this is the most talked about power scaling or versus battle discussion between the two, and that would be Saint Yuno, as in the Yuno that attained Saint stage and defeated Devil Zenon, versus Devil Union Asta. Let's remember that Yuno's full Spirit Dive is a massive multiplier over his base stats, just like Asta's. Easily many tens if not hundreds of times. And Saint Yuno on top of that is even higher, as Saint stage is gained through more resonance with Bell, which is already how he has been adapting his power throughout the course of the series ever since he got her. It was also stated that the stronger the mage, the more stars are born. This was right after Yuno was struggling with creating stars, and then he made more. So this means that Yuno got stronger while in Saint stage. But also, it is important to note that all the additional abilities that Yuno gains with his star magic, as he can create force fields, make whips of light, and also use them to teleport around the battlefield. In terms of power scaling, Yuno actually scales well above Lilith or Nama, and likely scales way above when they were even fused, as the only statement for Fusion Lilith is that her power was more than just 1+1, which would mean that Fusion Lilith is just more than 2 times stronger than regular Lilith. Whereas Zenon at 100% was already basically the same power as the twins, and in his devil form would be way stronger. Devil Zenon was also likely heavily suppressing himself at first, as even though he was stronger than his 100% self, he went from taking damage from base Yuno's star magic and not being able to react to it, to taking similar levels of damage against a full Spirit Dive Yuno, and also able to have a pitched battle with him. Like I said, Spirit Dive was stated to be a many times multiplier in the guidebook, and that was just Spirit Dive 1, so that would mean that Spirit Dive is over 4 times stronger, which makes him stronger than Lilith and Nama fused together. So yeah, Saint Yuno would absolutely body Fusion Lilith in a fight. It would not even be close. This is supported when a weaker Yuno with less Saint power can do anything at all against Lucifero. Though this is only suppressed half manifested Lucifero, he still scales above all of the amped captains. We know that Twilight Valhalla creates a trail of runes to the people it's amping. This wasn't shown for Nozel when he bodied Megicula, which means that Nozelle's regular magic was stronger than hers. He just couldn't kill her because he wasn't arcane. But this suppressed Lucifero actually no-diffed an actual amped Nozelle. What this actually means as well is that this version of Yuno with dribbles of Saint power would likely no-diff Megicula already. Remember that Lucifero considered Yuno as someone that could possibly end him? So this means that even though he isn't at his full Saint power, he still has Saint power, as Lucifero thought of him as somebody who could end his life. And we have to remember that even Yuno's star teleportation could work against the full power of half manifested Lucifero, and could create barriers with his stars that protected them from the gravity. And he was able to survive hits from Lucifero, and was fast enough to annoy him with teleportation, but he just wasn't strong enough to damage him. Whereas when you compare Asta to what he did against Lucifero, Asta wasn't as mobile as Yuno using his stars. Lucifero also stated that Asta was the easiest to kill. The only thing here is that Asta could actually damage Lucifero, so Asta has way higher AP than Yuno, which means if the two were to fight, all Asta needs to do is land a hit on him, though Yuno would also be likely strong enough to damage Asta. And with how mobile Yuno is at this point, I actually doubt that Asta will be able to land a hit, and Asta also has a time limit, so it's a pretty close battle between Devil Union Asta and Saint Yuno at the end of the Spade Saga. But we also can't forget about Asta's Devil Union abilities, as he can create incredibly large slashes of anti-magic, and gives him a ranged ability. He can create Black Divider of this size, and he can use the Demon Destroyer to seemingly cancel out the magic of his opponents for a brief time and freeze them. Also, Yuno wouldn't be able to use his stars to get close to Asta, as his anti-magic aura would break them. As Yuno admitted, he couldn't transport Asta while he was in Devil Union. Also, keep in mind that when Asta wields the Demon Slash or Katana, he can use Infinity Slash, which also gives him insane range, speed, and power. And his entire Devil Union form changes whilst wielding the Slasher, and his armor is different, his star on the chest is different, and with this form he actually performs a bit better against a serious Lucifero, as he was actually able to get close and force him to manipulate space to dodge the Infinity Slash. The Yuno's speed with the stars were able to allow him to be a menace to Lucifer on the battlefield. I think that Yuno barely has an edge here, and he'd have more stamina, a way to dodge Asta's anti-magic. And with Asta's time limit in such a close battle, that is what is going to make the difference here. You could argue that Asta would level up his Destroyer Sword and use it to freeze Yuno, but Yuno would likely just teleport away and be unaffected. If Yuno started with full Saint power, and if it was Saint Yuno at his full power, versus W and Asta, I think it's actually pretty clearly that Yuno would win. It's still a close battle, but of course, Asta's not done yet. He would attain higher resonance with Liba and get to a pseudo-true Devil Union, where he vastly surpassed his previous power, essentially allowing himself to low-diff Lucifero. He's way faster than him, tanks many attacks from him, physically superior to him with a kick, and can slice through him like butter. So even if Asta had only a 5-second time limit in True Devil Union, he would just no-diff Saint Yuno like it was nothing. So Asta wins this saga as the strongest with his True Devil Union, but Yuno in his full Saint power is a close second. Well, not really a close second, but he is second. But don't forget how much potential Yuno has left to get stronger. He has true magic with both of his magic types to learn. He has ultimate magic with both of his magic types to learn. So he could have 2 ultimate magic spells as he has 2 grimoires. He also has to learn the full potential of his brand new star magic, as well as master the magic stone that he possesses. So there is still more than enough potential for Yuno to catch up and surpass Asta, and I clearly believe that by the time they do finally have their one-on-one match, they will be very nearly equals. So that's it for this scale of Asta and Yuno in the Spade Saga. I went from starting on their bases from the first arc to their most powerful forms in the final arc. Let me know your thoughts of this video down below. Leave a like if you did enjoy, and subscribe and turn notifications. Shout out to Art de Burrow for making the thumbnail, and also for being the artist for the 9 Fates webtoon, so please go be sure to check that out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys all have an amazing day.